Good evening. Good evening. This is the Rutland Town Planning Commission and it's June 22nd, 2023. Thank you all for joining. Let's start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we've got attending tonight. We've got Jim Hall, Sherwin Hunter, Dana Peterson, and we've got Howard Burgess and myself. So everyone's voting. Who's here? Just FYI. So first order of business is the approval of the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, down to public comment and no one's here. No one's on Zoom either. Okay. We'll skip over that and go kind of flip the old and new business on this agenda. So I thought it might be a little more interesting to start with what happened Tuesday night at the select board meeting regarding the short-term rental ordinance. No decision was made. The public had a chance to speak out about it again, and there's many of the same people, fewer than the first group. Sherman and Dana, do you want to offer some perspectives?
Hi, Andy.
Hey, Andy.
Apologize.
Sure, I'll offer up.
Didn't mean to put you guys on the
No,
spot.
that's okay.
Sorry.
Just gathering my thoughts.
We're talking
The-
about the meeting the other night.
Yeah,
It
I was
was-
hoping we would.
It was fairly well attended. I would say that once again, the majority of the people in attendance who registered to speak spoke in opposition to the ordinance. There was one gentleman, I think he's a lawyer in town. His name is Steve Dardek, who actually highlighted the value and his support of the ordinance in terms of making sure that everybody was covered, the security issues were addressed, and that anything that was not foreseen could be captured within the scope of the ordinance, because just because there isn't a problem doesn't mean that there isn't something to be concerned about or thinking about. So he spoke very eloquently, much better than I did just now, about that, and he supported the ordinance, but he was one of only probably 6 or 7 people that spoke. I think the number of people who spoke at this hearing were fewer than the one that we heard on the 1st of June. But I would also say that the same concerns were raised. It was interesting that the feeling, or at least it was presented, that a large number of people were trying to do this as a means of paying for their property taxes. When they told their stories, I really appreciated Matt Getty's question about telling the stories about why they were doing what they were doing and how it fit into their lifestyle. And most people were doing it as a job or a business. But I don't think some folks understood that business and commercial operations were very similar. The reason that I say that is because when the meeting was over, the hearing was over, and I was outside, I asked some folks if they understood what a cottage industry was, and they said no, they hadn't heard of that. And I said that it was basically a small business operated out of someone's home, that was used as a method of securing income. So I think that there is still some misunderstanding about what the purpose of the ordinance is. And one person said that it would be great if people would just, if government would just stop taking their hand out of the pocket of, small business people. Anyway, we had a nice conversation afterwards, but it was clear to me that additional either education or information is needed for people to understand our motivations, and that our motivations are not nefarious, and neither were the select boards. At the meeting, Bill made some clarifications that I thought were very helpful. Barbara made a presentation to set the stage for our for the hearing, and captured, I think, very well our deliberations. And that was that we had spent a considerable amount of time going over the ordinance and incorporating feedback, which resulted in a reduction in the fees, which seemed to be one of the primary issues that they had, that it was a fee issue. And I don't remember whether it was Mary who asked about a registration process, if that were changed, whether that would make a difference. And some people said yes. Bill pointed out, I don't know if that was in public session, Bill, that, you can't just have a registration fee. If you don't have an ordinance, you have no way of ensuring compliance. The one thing that I wish I had done, or somebody had done, is to say that what we have, and because we don't have zoning, and they probably would be opposed to zoning anyway, is that in order for us to have any regulatory authority over anything, and to make sure that people are collaborating and cooperating, that is what goes to towns. They have the power to create ordinances in order to ensure the general public welfare. And Steve did mention, Dudick, is that his name? Dardick. Steve did mention that the town has an interest in these developments, and that the only way that interest could be promulgated or ensured is through ordinance. So overall, I felt pretty good with what we had done, and some of the questions that were asked of the individuals. It was a little surprising to have the meeting begin by a comment period from a select board member that would violate our rules of procedure in terms of going on about why it wasn't needed, and the amount of research that one person had done, which seemed to minimize, from my perspective, the work that this commission has done, and that Bill has done. And that was a little unsettling for me. But anyway, overall, it was pretty good.
I'd like to speak to that if I could.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Sharon Russell quoted the police chief, first constable, and the fire chief as all being against the ordinance. So considering that John Paul was sitting right there, one would have to assume that those quotes were accurate, and also that the fire chief is also here. I'm having a real tough time wrapping my head around the fact that of the safety and life safety ordinance, especially on the part of the fire chief and the second constable. They both part and parcel to knowing what happened at the Holiday Inn, Cortina Inn, which very much bespeaks to the fact that you cannot allow an operator, every operator, to police themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that everybody in that room that were Airbnb people run their businesses correctly. I honestly believe that. But there certainly can be people that we all know that are not going to follow those rules. I didn't get into this before, but our home in Florida, we registered with Vacasa. Now, Vacasa is an Airbnb type operation. They do an extremely detailed home inspection to the point where they check the amount of silverware you have. You have to have so many pots and pans. You have to have so much linen. Everything is such, and they send someone in and they will not accept you until you do so. The time of our inspection, I was waiting for the fire alarm people, actually burglar alarm people to come and replace the missing smoke detector in my hall, which I had to take down because it was malfunctioning. We still passed. They do everything, but they do not check life safety issues. And I think that,
This is the platform, the Airbnb platform.
yeah, well, it's Vacasa,
Right.
which is it's a fully concierge website. They go so far, I should mention, they put in, you have to have a certain locking device on your front door. They have noise monitoring inside the house. It's very detailed to get into. However, they provide full 24-hour monitoring of the home. So you could be elsewhere in the world and not have to worry about your piece of property at all.
Hmm. Yeah.
And they extract a reasonable fee for doing such, of course. Okay. But I guess that my point is obvious, that they check so many things, but they don't check life safety issues, and they don't check.
Hmm.
We haven't had window, and none of these people spoke to the fact that any of that was ever inspected. So I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, I wanna, that's one of the things that I think I addressed, or at least if I didn't, I had thought about it and said to Bill and was going to, so I just can't remember whether I actually did or not. And that was, the way it was presented is that Sharon Russell had talked to all of these people and they didn't have issues with it. And the thing is that there's a difference between having an issue with something and whether it has caused a problem and you've had to go in and found something awry, and saying that people are not in favor of it, because John Paul, to his point, didn't say anything, whether he was or wasn't.
Right.
And I think that that's really important, because it's the way it was being presented, that just because the fire chief or the police chief didn't say that there was a problem.
Just one thing, it's later in the meeting, the fire chief was on zoomed in, and he said, he didn't say he was against it.
Right.
He said he didn't understand.
Right.
The need for it. He was
He was asked.
It
I
was
think he
somewhat
was
vague.
asked-
Would
Yes,
you agree
yes,
with
but-
that?
But he did not say he was against
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, then I missed.
Yeah, you're right.
But he was,
at the end.
it was rather vague. I thought his answer was,
Yes.
Yes.
Well, he was asked a direct question, it's like, what did he not like about the ordinance?
yeah,
Because
and
because the select board had heard that he wasn't in favor of it. And his only answer was that, well, it hasn't caused, these short-term rentals haven't caused any problems yet, which was sort of the theme of the public that night.
And I think that that's true, that they were trying to say that there's no need for the ordinance because it's not, what's the issue?
Mhm.
And they weren't seeing that as, because what I also said is, this was outside of the meeting, that some of the people were saying, well, there's an assumption that we're all, underhanded. And I said, no. You have to understand that we have had long debates. And I don't think there's a person on the planning commission, at least, in our debates that believes that that's the case. Everybody believes that folks are doing the best they can. Our interest is in making sure that there is uniform safety and security for anybody who occupies a space in a town offering. And they also didn't understand the difference between a private residence and who could be invited to a party there, and an establishment that is running a business for hosting people overnight. So I did help, I tried to say that there's a difference there, that in your private residence, you're covered by your own homeowner's insurance. And you assume that liability when you have X number of people for a sleepover with your children. but that's not the same thing. And the level of requirement for a business enterprise that is catering to the hospitality industry are different. And that's what the interest of the town was.
Yeah,
So
if I could then work along with that, the I think maybe we should identify what the resistance was. I think, in going through my head, I think one part of the resistance to this ordinance would be the fact that they're gonna have to have their home inspected.
Mhm.
That the fact that any number of them might not be even close to coming to being
Mhm.
inspectable, due to egress window size, due to lack of proper egress, and obviously smoke detectors and CO detectors. So that, and potentially, depending what else is attached to the building, I mean, there could be any number of other issues. So that's one thing. The second thing was obviously the money issue,
The fee structure.
which I think, again, my personal thought is that I think we're gonna see 60+ residences before this ordinance takes effect. Easily. So I'm thinking a $50 fee, which will cover the $3,000, would be the right amount of money.
Which is.
That is my personal feeling. You guys can,
You mean
we
a
can,
flat fee for
I
it?
mean, just, yeah.
flat fee. Just, we've got to take the money issue out of there. And the inspection issue is got to be put as the key thing, the inspection of the safety inspection. Everyone that rents a room anywhere should know that room is, that what they're renting is
No matter
safe
whether
and
it's a-
secure,
right,
no
whether
matter
it's a
what it
private
is.
Hotel. or whether
Exactly.
it Is a bed and breakfast that is regulated.
And we,
by the
and we
state.
already have these homes now. What I think is gonna happen, and actually Sharon Russell hit that particular nail on the head. I'll just say that nail, that singular nail, in which he said that we're gonna have more conversions because owning a home that you rent by the year and you get a bad tenant, it's impossible to get them out. And so therefore makes the Vacasa Airbnb rental a much more attractive
Right, offering.
rental because you can protect the home. And the second thing that goes along with that, we have skier days that are increasing in Killington constantly, so we have more demand. And now we have, how many hotel rooms have been taken out of the pool,
Mhm.
the hotel room pool, and turned into
The general.
whatever
assistance
we call
voucher.
that. And so all those room, and it looks like from what I read in the paper this morning, that's gonna go on at least for another year. Apparently, by the state legislature.
I forget what the cutoff is, but yes, it will go on for people who haven't
Right.
found other housing yet.
Yeah, and so. Then
Yeah,
I'll shift it on, that's my,
Sherman, anything?
Well,
I'll get to that person.
let me just address something that Andy said. I didn't get the impression that the money was an issue. In fact, one of the people actually said the money is not a problem because we can get that back. But that doesn't matter. The other thing is that there were almost no specifics. Just, we don't want to do these things. We don't like doing these things. It's an invasion. Why do we need it? But no one said, we don't like the idea of having a home inspected. They didn't say that.
no,
That may
What?
be the underlying, I'm not disagreeing with you,
Yeah.
but
General
it-
regulation.
it did not say it. No one said anything about the parking. Well, there was one woman here who talked about ordinances and repeating ordinances, and her argument was full of holes because a parking ordinance for an Airbnb is not the same as the town ordinance. So she was saying they're the same thing. Why are we duplicating it? But, and people didn't talk about, I mean, the things in this, on these pages were not addressed.
right,
Right.
I
And
agree.
asking us to review it is like, what do you want us to do?
We've done it multiple times.
I
In fact, we
think
went
so.
back and reviewed it after they gave us.
But yeah, what are they opposed to in
They
the
didn't
ordinance?
say.
specific-
They-
That's
we're
why
supposed
I'm
to do-
playing my
It's,
guessing.
it's regulation. They're opposed to regulation.
So,
I think you
yes,
wanted to say something.
Oh, go ahead. Just two other things. And I think one of the things that Don Chieffi brought up was a good idea. Was the fact that it's a commercial.
yeah,
venture. I mean,
Mhm.
it's commercial, it's not private anymore. And the other thing that hadn't come up yet is, where do the insurance companies stand on your renting your home,
Mhm.
not having it inspected and, you know, in these cases?
Yeah, Steve Dardak mentioned something about you would want to, insure your home and
Yes.
insure your car.
Yeah.
Your car as
But-
well, but
That hadn't been addressed at all.
By Casa, the particular site we went with, they require a rider and you have to provide
Huh.
it to them.
That's
uh,
good.
That,
yeah,
and for so many thousand, and then they require each guest. A part of the fee is paid for an insurance policy. For a liability insurance policy.
For the homeowner.
For the homeowner,
yeah.
and that's part built in, but that's, again, there's just so many sites out there that there's so many sites, and Bill can speak to this better than I can, that. You can register, you could register a chicken coop, I believe, take nice pictures of it and
Over to you, Bill.
It's an
Yeah.
angle, you take the
Yeah,
picture.
exactly.
So there was a discussion about the financial burden that this places on them, and to Sherman's point. That wasn't specific. It didn't say like the fees are too much. We don't, and we were kind of looking up some of these as we were going along and yeah.
Even at 60%,
Even at 60%.
they would make up the fee in
One or
2 nights.
maybe. The whole goal of the fee structure from the beginning was to cover the cost of a vendor
Mhm.
who would help us research these.
Mhm.
That vendor, when he gave us a proposal, said based upon their initial findings, there's about 30 short-term rentals in the town. If we charged $100 flat fee and they all registered, that would be it. We got it covered. I had played with the idea of the smaller fee and then the per bedroom, because that would give us some cushion. If somebody didn't pay, it would help with that. Plus, there could be some regulatory things that go into this that could cost us, that we would be able to pay out of that. So that way, the 98% of the taxpayers that aren't involved in this wouldn't have any cost, albeit very little. They wouldn't have any cost related to the ordinance regulating people in a specific thing. So we can play with numbers, because I have the list of Airbnb that I found, and it's roughly 55 bedrooms. So we can take that number and extrapolate it back and say, okay, if we charged $25 registration and $5 a bedroom, what would we get? What would we get? We could play with that and see if it matches up. That would, I think, help to alleviate that concern and take that away.
If that's really the concern.
If that's really the concern. And there was another point that was brought up that said, why are you singling us out? There's lots of people that started small businesses. Why aren't you doing anything with them? It's like, the reason is they aren't using their homes to house other people on an overnight basis. Like, if they were, absolutely they would. But the other part of that is the lister's office is expending an enormous amount of effort on an everyday basis, trying to identify all the small businesses and get them caught up, because they are actually obligated to participate in a town program. We have business personal property tax, like they are actually obligated. So this group is not being singled out. We've been working to get caught up. So that's a part of that process as well. So, and I think we were talking about this a little while ago. It seemed to me that I'm fair to say everybody in the room was an Airbnb participant. And like Andy said, there's about 12 to 15 sites out there. And when Joe brought up, if you have a bad actor and they said, well, nobody does this rogue, I've never seen one. Well, that doesn't mean they don't exist. It means they haven't been found yet. And that's where hiring this vendor to help us scrub these other sites, which they
Right.
will do gladly for actually a pretty reasonable amount of money, will help us get those out of the shadows. Because if they are, and if they are doing that, which we hope they're not, but if they are, they could be not charging tax to reduce the cost. Airbnb does collect the tax on behalf of the renter. A lot of companies do not. part of our registration process requires proof of tax payments to the state. So there's no financial obligation we're putting on them other than taking tax from the renter and giving it to the state. Doesn't cost the property owner anything. The
Right.
renter pays that. So there were a few concerns which I think were addressed, and especially in our meeting where it talked about water and sewer, things that weren't even part of the ordinance were being brought up as concerns, and we're like, we're not talking about any of that.
Right,
And that even came
right.
up the other night about garbage. We don't have anything in there like that says you can't have a garbage can out front of your house. Like, that's not there. So
Yeah, and part of the discussion went to, are there out of town people,
Yes.
owning these homes and operating these short-term rentals? And you had an answer for that.
we have for sure 6 property owners of record, and there's about to be a 7th, who are 100% out of state. Colorado, Texas, I think Arizona, Massachusetts, New York City. Like, there's no question they don't their primary address is not the house they're renting. Now, there are some people who are here and said, that's not I have a single family home, which is correct. They have a single family home on one end of town. They live in a single family home in the other end of town, but they are still a town resident. So I think there was some discussion about, do we want to have a fee structure for that? That could get complicated. And I think that could lead to people trying to misrepresent where they are. And I think that would probably be more trouble than it would actually cause. So probably, if we looked at the math on a chart, if then chart, what would it look like to try and make sure that and one person made a reference to it being a money grab. I'm like, if we were a money grab, it'd be $500 a house and you're done. Like, that's it. That's not not at all what we're doing. And
Right.
I think we tried to make that pretty clear. And that was never my intent, we're not making money. We're not trying to make money on this at all. That's,
Right.
we don't need to.
But you're trying to come up cost neutral.
Right, exactly. Like, and there were some people saying, I don't like you being able to tell me what you can do with my house. We're not. You are making the decision to participate in the program. If you are, these are the rules you're going to play by.
Yeah.
If you go play baseball for a team, there's rules. You can't make them up as you go along. It's the same.
Yeah,
That's
so-
what it is.
So it was tabled, or, essentially tabled. The next select board meeting is July 5th, but they may not have time to take it up. It's a special meeting because of the 4th of July holiday. There may be some issues around the new fire station that will preoccupy most of that meeting. So I'm not quite sure when. It could be the 5th or it could be the 18th, I guess. So I'm wondering, after hearing this, do you want me to go with any kind of different message or repeated message when it does come up in July?
I think we should send them a letter.
Hmm.
Restating our position, saying, for one thing, that the fee structure is totally up to them.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think we erred, frankly, in getting into the fees in the first place.
The fee schedule is up to
I
the
don't,
select board?
that's, pardon?
Fee schedule is up to the select board? Is
Is-
that what you're saying?
Let's just get, I mean, as the planning commission, I think we should just get out of the fee structure entirely. And not even make a recommendation, and that's totally their purview, and I mean, I don't see $3,000 as being spent by the town to pay for that service as being very much. I did want to point out one other thing. One lady mentioned the fines. Remember that? Yes,
Mhm.
And then
she mentioned
Yeah,
Yeah.
for not registering.
for not registering
Mhm.
and said, if I forget the end of the November, there'll be a problem or whatever. She objected. So I think the money is, I honestly do believe the money is a large part of the issue, and that's.
There was an assumption that the fines would be imposed automatically if somebody missed the deadline, and that is not what we discussed
But
here.
it does read, I mean, if you read it, it doesn't give any leeway for it. You can understand making that assumption.
Well, so that we had the waivers at one point, and
Mhm.
Kevin suggested taking them out. He
Right.
said because the application could be inconsistent. when it comes to a waiver, and he says that becomes a problem, which does make sense.
Yeah.
So. Again, there have been some instances where we have worked with people to be compliant. Rather than forcing, just saying, here's a fine, like, let's work with you to get in compliance, because that's the goal, not the fine.
I think we should state that our goal is the life safety issue. And secondarily, the collection of the collecting of the taxes, which are everyone who rents an Airbnb is obligated to pay those taxes.
Right.
And so the purpose of our ordinance is to ensure that happens. The fact that folks are rented on Airbnb is great, and they're paying them. And as I said, I believe everyone in that room is paying.
And there was an objection saying, we don't need to register because you can just go on there and get the list of everybody in town, which is not true. You
Right.
can't, like, you actually can't.
Mm,
You don't get an address until you book a reservation.
And it may
Exactly.
not be Airbnb.
And they might not be Airbnb,
Right.
right, and that was the other thing, it's like, there was a lot of focus on that, and. Joe, I think, kind of brought that point back later on, is like, we're talking about this one, but there are absolutely more. And this is not an Airbnb ordinance. And Airbnb does actually have sections on their page for states and for towns, so if you register, they have resources. If you're looking to create one that says, here are rules for your town. So they actually proactively offer those to people that are looking to do this too, so they're not, it didn't appear that they are trying to hide the fact there's regulations in town either.
No, in fact, it's in their interest to make sure that their customers, being the homeowners that are listing with them, know what the regulations are for the town, so that nobody runs afoul and everybody can operate smoothly in collaboration.
So Bill, what you said, it would be difficult for someone who's registering with Airbnb to miss the fact that we're Rutland town, not just Rutland, right?
Yes,
Okay.
I tried to, because the topic of the 1% tax came up. And which is, we don't make thousands of dollars off Airbnb rentals, but it's important, because if one person says they are and one person says they're not, Airbnb says they use GPS coordinates, but wouldn't provide me with a list of where they are. Still, they said, well, this is what we use, but still wouldn't provide me with a list to be able to verify it. I said, that's what we want to do. We want to verify. So in the absence of being able to verify it, and without the renters or the property owners proactively just saying, oh, well, here's my information. You want it? Here you go. Nobody has said, oh, we're okay with registration. Nobody said, like, hey, here's my information. They're still keeping it. So,
right.
we want to make sure that, and, I was even thinking of like, okay, well, if they pay 1% and they tell us how many nights they booked and their average fee, their average rate, we could figure out how much they paid. Could we reduce that from, like, it just, but that gets complicated, and that gets a very individual thing, and, saying, could their fee be a sliding scale, but that would be very complicated. So,
Right.
I think if the fees are if the financial burden was the word that was the phrase that was used.
The first meeting, I didn't hear it Tuesday night.
I didn't, in fact, one,
Well, yes,
Yes.
but I didn't hear it from the
The
host.
other thing was, everybody kept saying, you need to do more research, you need to do more research. I'm like, where and on what? And they said, let's
Right.
look up Airbnb. I'm like, but that's not what we're talking about here. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go to someone who's on the Zoom call just to check in and see if you're here to talk about the short-term rentals. Ryan? Or if you're not, we'll try to work you in later in the agenda. Are you still there, Ryan? Okay, how about, if we have a delay with the select board getting to this, we don't know for sure. Do you think there's any value in us, the planning commission, reaching out to the fire and police departments and the constables?
Well, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Asking them how they formulated their opinion, in other words?
We have not heard directly from them. Everything
No.
that's been reported
Yeah,
about them.
Everything,
We
right,
weren't
it's
even-
it's
they
second,
read it.
Right, we don't even know.
right, exactly.
But
I think that we just have to literally ignore it. They're entitled to their opinions. And that's that. I mean, and so the select board is the body that is either going to initiate this or not. And I think they can, I would hope they would see past all the objections that are brought up
Yeah.
and look at it strictly from the life safety standpoint.
May not have been presented to them. To bring that to their attention, that may be.
That's,
what wasn't brought to their attention?
The life safety aspects of what we're doing.
I
I'm just
mean,
saying,
we say it all the time.
well, not to
but-
the fire chief, we haven't talked to.
Yeah, I mean, what I said Tuesday night was that I apologize if we didn't contact or invite
Right.
them in, during our process. But one of the reasons I forgot to do that was that because we typically, traditionally, we hear from the fire chief. And sometimes the police chief, when they have opinions about things that we're working on. Howard, you're shaking your
I'm
head.
not surprised with what I'm hearing. I'm not surprised at all. But them not getting involved to the right level.
Has the select board, got to a point where you could say that they've, totally reviewed this thing, or is that still in a work in progress?
I think they've all read it. Are you talking about what kind of review?
Well, sooner or later, they're gonna have to act on it.
Yes, yeah, and there was some discussion about whether it should be studied more. We kind of talked about that too. Whether we should have a committee or something. I don't know what the select board has in mind, but that was brought up, that maybe it needs to be studied.
I would be very reluctant to get into further work on this until the select board has totally reviewed the thing.
And kicked it back to us. So. Sherman.
I agree with Jim 100%. With something, with some comments or something about the only thing we've got comments about with the document itself, no comment about page 7, where you say the duration is for a number of guests is limited.
We've got comments about the
one's-
concept.
No, the
Basically,
content,
that's right,
no,
The concept
nothing
of the
about the
ordinance.
content, just the concept.
right, over the ordinance.
So if we want to, if we're asked to do more, we need to know where should we look, because we're happy with everything from our perspective. So tell us what you have a problem with, and let us look at that and see if we should change it.
Yeah.
One of the things that was telling in my conversation with some of the public afterwards was that the woman from Burlington who appeared on Zoom
The
for-
first meeting.
during our hearing.
Our meeting.
I thought that was good public outreach, awareness and helpful in terms of what she might be able to bring to the picture in helping municipalities to decide. That was dismissed by the folks supporting the Airbnb who attended our meeting. And the point was that, well, of course, this person would like regulation because they're regulated up there in Burlington. And of course, they'd want everybody else in the state to be regulated just like they're regulated. And it's a different environment. And I said, my guess is that the regulation in Burlington, or the regulations in Burlington, are far more restrictive and
Oh,
far
yeah.
more directive than what we're dealing with. And each community should have the flexibility to be able to address that harmoniously. So that those who fall under the ordinance can have a say in how that ordinance is crafted. And I'm not a betting man, but if the select board kicks it back and tells us to, do some additional work, which I think is a distinct possibility, then we could be inviting you folks to help us navigate that. Oh, no, I don't have time. Was,
The one lady
the-
that spoke, the one lady who said she manages
Right.
150 properties,
she said she'd do it.
pardon?
She said she'd participate.
She would.
She-
But I would love to know what her, I mean, she was quite critical, I thought, and quite frankly, I took it that she intimated that we hadn't done enough research, which I
Mhm.
don't think is correct. That's why I admire you for standing outside talking with those folks. That's why I got my
She was
car.
not, but she wasn't part of the group that we were talking with.
Oh, really?
She
Okay.
happens to be the daughter-in-law of the woman who came and spoke to us on the first.
Who was here? She was.
Melody Hemingway.
Melody Hemingway. That
Yeah,
is her
okay.
daughter.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
she was at both meetings and she's one of two people that after I asked a couple of times, said that they would sit on a committee.
Right.
And Bridget Remington was the other one, a former as a short-term rental host.
But even the lady who seemed to have reviewed it and had some specific things, she didn't mention.
No, right, exactly. She didn't
mention
get
what
down
they
to
were.
brass tacks at all
Yeah.
as far
This
as.
page or this
Right,
section.
right,
or-
what was wrong, and she said that certain items that were applicable in Killington, I believe, and she made a mention of that. And, in my reading of the ordinance, I think it would be applicable in any town in the state, what we came up with. And frankly, I think, and not that I did any of the work, but that the ordinance that was put together by everyone was really good and we should sit on it.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks,
It
Will.
was and I want to commend both of you too on speaking at the meeting.
Yeah.
Both did a very good job, and I think that set the tone to the room, and knowing that this isn't something that we just came up with out of the blue.
Mhm. Are we still getting, is the town, the listers and the rest, the other offices still getting calls from other towns looking at,
I haven't gotten any recently. I don't know if they have. The last people said, well, we'll just keep an eye on and see what you do. So they're probably watching, but I don't,
Yeah.
I haven't heard of anything specific. so.
They're probably waiting to find out what happens at the select board level.
okay. So, what about Andy's suggestion of a letter?
No, I'm just throwing that out just to reiterate to them how we feel strongly about the life safety issue, and however they want to redo the wording or whatever,
Mhm.
I feel we kind of have to rebut the, for lack of a better word, let me be careful here since we're being recorded,
Please be careful.
opinion of the fire chief, the police chief, and the first constable.
I
Well-
think that carries some weight. It does.
What does, Barbara?
The fact that there is this perception that
Yes,
they don't see a need for this.
Right.
It carries a lot of weight.
But it's also,
It does.
not a single one of them has actually said that. So at this
Ma-
point in time, it's all hearsay.
So maybe we should speak to them.
Well, that's what I was asking.
I,
Was a public hearing. Was well warned.
And that's what I said the other night. It's like, I'm surprised that we're getting this resistance from this group of people, because there was ample notice out there. If,
Who one would think would be on the other side of it.
and I'm, and we're, I don't, you've all served on here long enough. You know that fire chiefs has come before us and said, this is not gonna work, or, the driveways need to be wider and all this sort of stuff. We've had more activists, sort of safety officials before, so that's kind of.
Well, nothing's gonna happen for a couple of weeks anyway, so why don't we just take it up in the next meeting, everybody, have a couple of weeks to think it over. And last night, the thing about the Holiday Inn Cortinas, when it came to me, and I said, how did I miss this, when I was here?
one of the impressions that I got from the select board, as well as many of the people speaking, is that they had looked at this, but they hadn't necessarily read it. just the way money's talked about, there was one lady who, not this time, but before, who talked about having to make a payment every time I have a visitor or and that was just that was a misinterpretation that we didn't. And I'm just wondering how many people really read this fully
Mm.
and who were commenting, who we're talking about.
Would it be of any value to go to the select board ahead of, whenever they're gonna take this up, ask them ahead of time if they have any questions about what our intent is or what our research showed.
And what Andy's saying, if we're gonna say something to them, maybe we should just reiterate that our overall drive-by in this was safety, nothing else.
Mhm.
And if you look at all these issues, they address safety.
And
One way or the other.
equity, safety and equity,
Safety,
so that it's
okay.
applied to everybody, because just because one platform is doing something doesn't mean other platforms are. So
Yeah,
it was safety and equity.
Yeah.
And in the interest, and looking out for the interests of the town. Barbara, I've been pondering your question, and I don't know that it's a yes, no question about whether we should send a letter. But listening to what Sherman has said, and what Andy has said, I'm wondering if there aren't some things that we want to do, kind of like a Q&A, but not for the select board.
mhm,
Here's what we heard. Here's what we have done. What additional information do you need from us as you're going through your deliberations? Maybe they don't need anything. But I think that pointing out that not a single, at least in my recollection, not a single member of the fire or police have come before us to say what their objections are. It has been reported that there are no issues. And in fact, somebody said, I think Ed Dumas might have said, that there have been no reports,
right.
that there's a
He-
difference.
But he qualified that too. He said he'd have to go back and look at the records and see if there were short-term rentals
Yes.
Yes,
in what he did have in his records.
Right.
But off the top of his head,
he couldn't think of any.
Yeah.
But that's a different question. That's a different answer to a question that is not the same as saying that I am opposed. And so even the fire chief skirted the direct question about what his perspective on that was. And there may be lots of people out there who have a neutral perspective. I think it would be worth clarifying that for the select board. Now, maybe they can do that on their own. But if we, and I don't know, quite honestly, what role we should play, because we have done our due diligence.
and we have turned it over. to the
Right.
select board.
But if the question is, if we have in our minds, what we have to do as stewards of the public trust is, if we have some doubts about how the process is working, or how things have been represented, I think we have an obligation or a duty to inform the select board of what our collective thinking is, not individual thinking, but what our collective thinking is. If we have something like that, I mean, we came up with a 7-0 unanimous vote to send this document to the select board. And that was after great debate. And there were people who were saying, well, I think we just need more study, or I think we should hold this.
Review it in a year.
Right. And we went all around. Everybody to a person, myself included, came to a consensus. Not only a consensus, a unanimous decision that we had done our work and we should forward it to the select board.
So Bill, do you think anything along those lines would carry much weight with the select board? I mean, you know them best of all.
I think.
I'll tell you what changed my mind.
when I asked Bill how many units there were in place already, and he told me 30 anyway, maybe more. I believe that was your answer. I had no idea that there were that many. And that changed my mind.
Yeah, Don Chaffee said something similar. It's like,
And
is when Bill first approached him and told him, you know, about his research and the numbers, it's like, you know, Don Chaffee said, this is a problem. This is a potential
Potential.
pending
Potential
problem.
problem,
Right.
yes.
it's a ticking time bomb when there's nothing, no platform for, like we have worked on.
Right.
Yeah.
Understanding what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And trying to make sure that something doesn't happen in a preventative way, so that we don't have, a scenario where there's been a crisis or God forbid, somebody gets hurt.
Mhm.
And you don't want that to be on your head because you could have done something and didn't, so.
Just to finish, the reason I suggested a letter is, I think the document we sent him is fine. And I don't see any reason to restudy it at all. Maybe make some small tweaks. We send a letter, we're just finalizing it. We're asking them to pass it,
Mm.
pass a document for life safety, and more or less say in the letter that we feel that the document you got is just fine, the way it is. And
Okay,
because, I mean, we could play kick the can.
Well, the one thing that I would say is that if they want us to do more education about it, that's fine as you're going through the process of adopting anything. Because there is some misinformation out there and there are misperceptions about why this is being done. In spite of the fact that Barbara did a great job of putting together those frequently asked
Yeah.
questions.
yeah, I think that crosses the line a little bit, from us already turning it over to the select board. I think a letter reiterating our support still falls in the line of something that would be appropriate. But,
Oh, but not suggesting that they do more education.
right, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Just, I think just that we support it and, I don't know that we should mention about the objecting to the findings of the, whatever, the heads of departments. But I just think, and maybe we should just stay pro. So just say strictly that we feel that the ordinance is important due to life safety issue,
It's a no-brainer.
And it should be important.
and
that-
that's it.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
just stay behind that. And then that would kind of, I think, send a message that we really don't want the can to come back to us.
Which we may or may not want.
You want a motion?
You gotta be.
Yeah.
Cognizant of the fact that, they're probably, as they get into this thing, you're gonna have some questions. And, we need to be prepared to step in and answer their questions.
Yeah, yeah.
Talking about the select board, Jim?
I think to a person, they have read it, all of them. And some of the questions they do have, they posed to the host.
Yep.
The other night. But they may have other questions. You're right, Jim. But they've been doing their homework on this. So is there a motion to send them a very straightforward, short
Yeah,
letter reiterating our
Make that
support?
motion that we authorize the chair to send a letter to the Board of Selectmen stating our support for the ordinance as written and emphasizing the life safety portions of it as being most important.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor of sending this letter to the select board, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Will do. Okay. We'll let that go for another meeting, another evening. Ryan Gettner, did you want to say something to this group? Did you have something to bring to this meeting? Okay, so we'll move on. You should all have a copy of this presentation. There was a couple last week about the open meeting law. And this one was done by the new Secretary of State in her office. So there's some, feel free to look at this at your leisure. There are some interesting things in there that was news to me. And, I think we all know these pages aren't numbered, unfortunately, but about page 5, to whom does the open meeting law apply?
This one?
Yep. So, that includes us, but also all committees and subcommittees
Yep.
of bodies like ours. And that includes work groups as well. Not even it even goes that far.
I think it did say work groups where there was a quorum of the membership.
The next page, to whom does the open meeting law apply? Work groups, a public body, or of a public body? Yes. It
Yeah, but
applies.
elsewhere, I think it delineates that as a quorum of the public body.
A gathering of a public body's quorum.
Right.
To discuss business or take action.
So if a work group is just working to do something to present to a public body for discussion and deliberation, that does not count.
Let's keep going through this.
I don't understand.
I went through the whole thing and
Yeah.
I mean, I've lived this. I've been to a
Yeah,
number
I
of
don't-
Secretary
I have
of
to
State
admit,
trainings, but I don't want to.
What?
I don't get, some of it I don't know exactly what it means when we get down to a detail.
Yeah, okay. So what is not a meeting? I think we know what that is, and what is a meeting.
You can't
it
discuss
can-
any question in electronic means or anywhere else and try to come to some deliberation about an outcome.
that
That's a
would be a meeting.
That would be a meeting.
So on page 5, it says a meeting is a gathering of a public body's quorum.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
What is not a meeting?
I'm on about the 4th one. It says, to whom does the open meeting law apply?
Yep.
And then it has a definition of a meeting. A meeting equals a gathering of a public body's quorum.
Right.
To discuss business or take action.
Correct.
So if 2 people meet, it's not, it has to be a quorum. Okay,
That's
Let's
my
keep-
I
understanding.
thought you were saying the other thing. That's
No, no,
right.
no.
Okay,
Let's keep going through this.
okay.
Because there's some like curveballs in here. Are we having a meeting right now by accident? The following are probably not permissible, but ask your attorney. Group emails involving a quorum of a public body. And remember, public body goes all the way down through to a work group, committees. And, a
Quorum of the public body is the total number of representatives, which for us is 7. So in order for a work group to be considered a public meeting, you would have to have 4 members present in order for that to be a official public meeting.
Okay, question.
And they would have to be discussing something that was going to be voted on.
Right. Andy?
If my suggestion to send a letter to the select board, if I had emailed everyone with that selection, with that suggestion before the meeting,
It would be improper.
it would be improper.
Yeah.
Even though no action could be taken because I'm just sending out an opinion as to what we should do. But I understand, I mean, that's one reason,
Yeah.
That's why we
Yeah.
just had a motion to.
Right.
Empower the chair.
The purpose is to make all those suggestions and have all those discussions in the open.
Right.
Even a suggestion. I mean, even a question. That was, if Andy's email was a question, not a suggestion.
I think we run into issues if it involves the 4 or more people.
Okay.
And so
Yeah,
what
the-
happens
the
if I
board-
made a suggestion that we discuss this at the upcoming meeting?
Not a problem.
Not a problem.
And the reason is because you're asking to put something on the agenda.
Agenda.
The
Okay.
agenda is not considered a public meeting.
Right.
A forum, and it's just for debate. And so that will then be discussed at the public meeting, and that's.
So
okay.
therefore, you can put
Yes.
forth a suggestion or an idea to everyone. As long as you say that it's going to be, I'm putting this out so that we can
can
get it on
discuss
the
it.
agenda. And
There are
discuss it.
times when like a board member will send a message to me and other board members, but it's an informational thing, like here is something you need to know. The problem becomes when a person hits reply all, and now they're replying to that, now that becomes
A discussion.
Discussion, right.
That's a meet, like, that gets really, really gray, so you gotta be
That's true.
really, really careful with that. So when everybody's included in one message, like when I send you your meeting materials for board meetings, I do the same thing for them. But they don't hit reply all and say like, oh, well, let's go over, like, that does not happen. Because that would violate open meeting law. So it's like. If Sherman wasn't gonna make the meeting next time, it's the message everybody, hey guys, I'm gonna miss you next meeting. That's not a meeting, it's hitting reply and having a conversation about that is where that becomes a problem, so.
So this, yeah, and this next one is pretty interesting. Collective editing of document by a quorum. And that's being done more and more often with like Google Docs and things like that. Like if you're putting
Yeah,
together a
because you
town
can
plan,
comments and Have conversations in the document editing.
yeah.
Yep.
So that's
They
a
don't get
no.
that either.
Participation in a Facebook group or front porch forum by a quorum if the body's business is discussed. So the Secretary of State's suggestion is like, try to avoid any comments about official business on those forums. If you want to do a friendly little entry that doesn't talk about the business per se, that's okay, but don't get into what's being deliberated. All meetings need an agenda. And then there's 3 slides here of what notice the public should have of a regular meeting, a special meeting, and an emergency meeting. I think we've got those. I don't think there's any surprises in there.
No, we have those in our rules.
And what should be on the agenda. Specific topics of discussion, potential actions. If remote only, which we don't have. Information that allows the public to access in the location and time. What needs to be in the minutes, and we're real good there.
Yep.
Where the minutes should be posted, where and when. Quite a few slides here on executive sessions, which we rarely, I can't even remember going into an executive session with this group. But the information is here if you're interested. And then what should be done different if the meeting is held electronically or in a hybrid manner? I think we've noted that if a vote's not unanimous and it's a hybrid, there must be a roll call. I'm actually toward the end of this. Right now until July 1st, 2024. We can waive the physical location, but the select board's not.
Yeah, yeah. I know about that, yeah.
We're not doing, totally electronic meetings anyway.
And all of our meetings are recorded, so it's a moot point.
She was asked a question about those recordings. the Secretary of State at this training, and they're supposed to be available to the public, readily available upon request.
Right on the 24 hours, a day, 7 days a week,
Through here or through PEG TV?
starting the beginning of the year. So starting in February, every select board and planning commission meeting video is on our town YouTube channel.
Okay,
Is there a link off of our planning commission page to those videos?
It's on the town website. It's also been on Facebook a couple times, but yeah. Yeah, it's there. And
okay,
they-
so
they
that,
get- They get viewed.
then there's a section about public comment. Meetings, and then, we would look at the meetings, of public bodies. And you know, we give, we're okay there. I guess some towns ask what is reasonable for the amount of time you offer as public comment, and their advice is to consult your attorney. This page, just before questions on public meetings, the enforcement and penalties for open meeting law violations. This is kind of interesting. Her advice is that if someone files a complaint and thinks, you know, you haven't been following the law to the letter, you really need to respond. And you've got 10 calendar days to respond. And if you find that, oh, they're right, we did do a violation, you have 14 calendar days to fix that and take measures to avoid it happening again. And if you don't do the above, there could be attorney's fees and other litigation costs. I don't know if the town's ever gotten a complaint. So,
That which, and to that point, like when we have committee meetings, it's usually 1 or 2 board members, which we don't technically have to warn because it's only 2, but we always warn committee meetings because if another one wants to be there, there's never an issue with it being a meeting at that point.
so that's a good
That's
best
good.
practice.
Right.
Good to hear.
There's a difference between a subcommittee and a work group, however,
Right,
because a subcommittee technically has the authority of the board, regardless of how many members are present on it, because that has been constituted by the board. Whatever the number is, 50% constitutes a quorum of that.
so there's 2, committees are only 2. So,
Select
but
board committees.
we warn them and that way there's no issue with that. And
I'm just simply saying that the application of quorum
Yep.
is different, depending on whether it is a work group
Yep.
or whether it is a subcommittee.
Yep.
Because a subcommittee functions, that's not addressed in here. A subcommittee functions under the auspices of the board as it's duly constituted. And so a subcommittee, and for us, when I was in the public school system, usually had 3 people.
Yeah.
So 2 members constituted a quorum for
Okay.
making motions to take action back to the full board.
Yeah.
Rarely, although there were certain circumstances, was that committee authorized to make decisions on their own.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was, and it was mostly dealing with financial matters so that they wouldn't have to take something back
Yep.
to delay the process by which work could be moved forward. So paying a bill or getting some quotes for work. A work group does not have that authority and is actually doing work for the board or the commission. And they would only fall under the auspices of an open meeting if more than half of the membership of the board was actually on that. So I know that that's a fine line,
Yeah.
but 25 years of experience has told me
Yep.
how to delineate the difference between a work group and a subcommittee.
But there may be other aspects of the open meeting law that apply to the committee and the work group. Maybe they're limited in their, that they must, a quorum is needed for them to take action. But I think some of these other things, whether, they need to, do a roll call on non-unanimous, I think a lot of other things still apply.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying that it doesn't. And the only thing that I'm trying to distinguish is that if you have a work group that is made up of more than 50% of the public body, it is really it is that public body. It's the representatives of that public body. Short of that, that group has no authority or statute or statutory authority for making decisions, and it would have to go back to the full membership anyway. All I'm saying is that that's one way to delineate what your obligations are. But I don't want to split hairs. Even if I am.
But I think the town's best practice of noticing all meetings
Yeah.
is a good one.
Yeah.
And taking minutes of all meetings. Committees do that as well, right, Bill?
So we usually, so what typically happens is I record them for making minutes, and then we don't keep the videos because they'd be considered the transitory record just to make the meeting minutes, and once the board approves the minutes, that's it, so, yeah. They don't usually stick around, you don't usually stick around very long, because the minutes, there's some meetings, committee meetings going for 2 hours, but they come out of it with a recommendation at the end, and it's like, what was discussed is in the recommendation, so that's.
Right, which goes to the larger body.
Yeah.
Anyway. So the very last page are some contacts of the Secretary of State's office. Bill, I guess this Jenny Prosser, the middle one, is really good.
Okay.
She will answer anything, and
Okay.
she will answer every phone call and every email.
That's good.
And it may be even better than going to VLCT with open meeting law questions. She knows this stuff inside out.
Was she a presenter at this?
No, but every presenter said, call Jenny.
There you go.
The only one whose name is there. I don't think.
So. A little review of the open meeting law. Any announcements from anyone? Bill, with the townwide celebration, I don't know what to do. I've got quite a few vendors and people who will be displaying. We do have battery powered, we have Ace Hardware coming.
Good, great.
They asked, one of the questions they asked was like, can you help us with the transportation? So I asked for a little more, like, from where? Are we talking about the Rutland North Main Street store or some, New Hampshire somewhere? A lot of these people need tables, so I'll get a count for you. And what we have right now, besides Ace Hardware with lawn equipment that's battery powered, we've got GMP with electric vehicles. We got Efficiency Vermont with what they'll have some mostly stuff about their rebates. We've got Brock. We've got Heat Squad. I think that's it for those agencies. And we have one 4th grade student who wants to show her science fair project. And maybe we'll get another one. I was thinking of putting her at the planning commission table. But I'll get a count for you. And so August 19th is the date. Anyone else that we should be contacting for either energy related or do you have any ideas for what we do, the planning commission should be?
I had followed up on bicycles and I've gotten no.
Yeah,
The date is a very bad date because most of the bicycle stores that I've been contacting with have mountain bikes. And August is
prime time.
when it's very, very busy
Mm,
and it's a Saturday.
yeah,
And it's late August when kids are gonna be going back to school later. They
Right.
said they're just overwhelmed.
yeah. Yeah, So hopefully all this will fit into the parking lot.
Got several of on our side that we've got coming too, so, yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be big, we're gonna fit it all in, it's okay.
How many presenters are on the docket?
We have,
Celebration?
we should have regional ambulance, state police, our police with our dog, the fire department, highway, but highway's probably not gonna be down there because they've got 2 more trucks, so they're probably gonna do their stuff at the garage. We've got, sheriff's department is coming, we've got fish and game coming. So yeah, we've got some new stuff and I'm working on 1 or 2 helicopters too, so we'll see.
Whoa.
Gonna need a little
For
space for
Northwood,
that.
for landing on the field or?
Yeah.
Oh, good, cool.
Good, last year was pretty good. What'd you ask?
I just said you're gonna need space, that's all, the helicopter.
We got space. Well, if maybe first come, first served, and the later you get there, the farther away you get from the entrance, but we'll get you in, yeah.
You would think at some point the select board would get tired of cooking for all those people and would opt for food vendors, food trucks to come,
Right.
but I'm not sure we have room anymore.
Well, that would be a different thing, so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But so
Well,
far, they're
and
still
we
willing
got
to.
Happy Cow's coming again. They'll be there again. Yeah, they're always a big hit, so, yeah, oh, it's a lot planned.
Okay. And the fireworks are the 2nd
Yep. So it's like,
of July at Northwood.
Yep.
Okay,
Sunday.
yep, Sunday evening. Okay, we're on to the minutes of
Make
June
a-
1st.
Make a motion to approve the minutes. from the
Aye.
first, okay?
Was there a second? Did I-
And
Any discussion?
thanks, Bill, you did a nice job.
Very nice.
Parmesan years.
I don't hear anything.
Inspections going? Okay, good, we're all set.
Okay, all those in favor of the minutes as written so expertly by Bill Sweet. Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
Okay, we're adjourned. It's
So I would like to commend you on running the